This loving episode is brought to you by the good folks over at Getty's Bike Tours. Spring is almost here, so it's time to start planning your Gettysburg trip. And why not include a romantic bicycle tour with the one you love and learn about the carnage that destroyed the lives and happiness of loved ones everywhere during the Civil War? Go to gettysbike.com or call 717-752-7752 to make your reservation today.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
My funny Valentine.
What the hell? Here we go.
Civil War Valentine.
Why is this happening?
You make me smile with my heart.
Why does your face contort that way?
Your looks are laughable, Eric.
Not very nice.
Unphotographable. Yet you're my favorite work of art.
This might be the most horrifying thing that's ever happened.
Is your figure less than Greek, Eric? Is your mouth a little weak, Matt Borders?
Hey now.
When you open it to speak, are you smart? Don't change a hair for me. Please give some of your hair to me.
That's very curious.
Stay, Civil War Valentine. Stay. Each day is Valentine's Day. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. Right? Is your figure less than Greek, Eric? Is your mouth a little weak, Matthew Borders? When you open it to speak, are you smart? But don't change a hair for me. Not if you care for me.
Oh my God, it gets worse. It just keeps going.
Little Valentine's Day.
Or don't.
Just go. Each day is Valentine's Day. The Civil War, and that's what we're talking about today. Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You are wonderful. You are a wonderful crowd. You've always been. Thank you.
Clearly, that's a made-up audience.
Thank you. No, they're out in the parking lot. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. Another special one, a loving one. As you can feel, there's so much love in the room from Eric and Matt Borders, who were very encouraging during my nerve-wracking performance there.
We tried to stop it, but we couldn't.
Well, but thank you. You were nonetheless showing your love to me as your friends by sitting idly by as you allowed it to happen.
And making snide remarks.
And heckling.
Oh, is that what that was? I thought those were words of encouragement. Listen, I'd like to apologize to the listening audience at home for making you have to listen to that.
I also would like to apologize as the producer of this show that I could
Eric
not
didn't know.
stop that from happening.
That was something I've been thinking about doing for a couple of days. And of course, knowing, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm not really a singer, you see. And this is the...
You're not?
No.
Well, I'll be damned.
No, that was purely for the tongue-in-cheekedness of it all. And of course, it is Valentine's Day today, a day of love and song. And of course, My Funny Valentine is one of the more popular songs associated with this holiday. And of course, it was written in the Civil War by Frank Sinatra. Is that correct, Matthew Borders?
Written in the Civil War by Frank?
During the Civil War, sorry. Yeah.
I couldn't honestly tell you that.
Well,
I
that's
highly
not true.
doubt it.
That's not true. And shame on you for not knowing. We have Matt Borders here with us again today. Ladies and gentlemen, our Christmas episode with Matt was so popular. I got so much good feedback from that. I said, you know what? Let's do this through the next year. We don't need to do this all, every year, but through the next year, let's look at some of the bigger holidays that we celebrate, and let's see, what did they do during the Civil War? Was it even a holiday during the Civil War? If it was, how did they celebrate it? If it wasn't, what did they do instead? Did they do nothing? We don't know. But that's why we have Matt Borders. Matt Borders knows all these things, and Matt Borders is with us today. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Matt. Thank you for having me back, guys. It's always a pleasure to be here on Addressing Gettysburg.
You keep going. Showing the love. You're showing the love.
Say, with the accolades, well, it's again truly a pleasure to be here with you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Matt was very kind to bring a copy of his book, Faces of Union Soldiers at Antietam. I finally got myself a copy of it. You signed it. I'm very happy. Thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome.
I'm going to take it home and actually read it, but I'm eventually going to put it here in the library.
Well, I wanted to make sure that you were able to expand your repertoire here in the library because you've got some great books there. I figured I might as well donate one to the cause.
Absolutely, and we've got plenty of room. So, Mike Lentz was kind enough to get us these bookends here. So now we don't have to worry about them falling off the table like they were before, or using that fake cannonball to hold them up. Remember that one, Eric?
Still over here.
Yeah, it's still there. Now it's just a decoration.
Who knew that a perfect sphere would not be great for holding things in place?
Well, but we would stabilize it with the fuse, which is flat.
Yeah, it sure is, isn't it?
It didn't do the job. Okay, let's get into the message or the meaning here. Not the meaning. What am I trying to say? The topic at hand today, ladies and gentlemen, Valentine's Day. So, Valentine's Day, Matt. Real quick, was it even a thing?
Actually, come to find out, Matt, it was.
It was. So
when you first approached me about this show, I made the joke about a Hallmark holiday. And I am willing to say right now, folks, I was way wrong. And we're going to get into that.
A mea culpa right here.
That's right. And it was actually a fairly big deal. And we're going to touch on that. And
a matty culpa, we call that.
Matty culpa. There you go.
All right. So you admit that you were wrong.
Sure.
You were wrong. Matt Borders.
Matt Borders was wrong.
Host of the History Things podcast.
Co-host of the History Things podcast with my buddy Pat McGuire. That's right.
Oh, I was going to let that hang for a while so Pat would get all mad and then we would take it back. All right. So, okay, you were wrong. That's fine. Everybody's wrong. We all make mistakes. We're only human, Matt.
That's the mark of a good researcher and historian, is being able to recognize when you've made a mistake and go back and find the right info.
Exactly. What did you find? Look, first of all, I guess let's start with St. Valentine himself.
Sure.
Why does he get a day, and why is it the day of love?
Well,
what's so special about him?
St. Valentine, is a 3rd century Catholic saint, as we know, patron saint of love, young people, those engaged, and happy marriages. Okay, that's pretty par for the course. We're pretty aware of those, but check this out. Also, patron saint of epilepsy, beekeepers, travelers, and the plague.
You're kidding.
Nope.
Epilepsy and beekeepers.
Yep.
And the plague.
Not sure why.
Wait, so he's the patron saint
I'm assuming plague victims.
Okay, good, because I was getting worried there. Okay, so
now,
go ahead.
Valentine was persecuted for marrying Christian couples and aiding Christians who were being persecuted by Roman Emperor Claudius II. He would be arrested by Claudius's forces in Rome, and come to find out, Valentine and Claudius actually got along pretty well.
Really?
Yeah, they had good conversations. They seemed to like each other. Unfortunately, Valentine probably overstepped his bounds in this budding friendship when he tried to convert the emperor. And at that point, Claudius demanded that Valentine renounce his faith or be put to death by beating and beheading.
He's like, do you ever meet somebody or have a friend who suddenly gets into one of these new wave religions, and they're like, "Hey man, you should stop by and check out my church." They would say, "Check out my church," like it's just, "Hey, yeah, just check it out," That's always a sign that they're trying to recruit you.
I have heard
so he probably did that. What was his name? Claudius?
Claudius.
He's like, yeah, hey, Claudius, you should stop by. Why don't you let me out of prison one day and you can stop by and check out my church?
Now, the reason Valentine is associated with February 14th is because he was executed on February 14th.
Really?
In 269 CE, Common Era.
So it's actually a kind of morbid day.
Yes.
Should be, at least.
A
but
little
we
bit,
do it about love.
Yep.
Well, how does it go from an execution day to a love day?
Well, that's the question. And the date is not entirely known either, because not only 269, but also 270, 273, and 280 Common Era have been thrown out there as possible dates of his end. Now, one legend states that prior to his death, he had actually healed the blind daughter of one of his jailers and had left her a note signed, "Your Valentine."
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of where the sending notes and letters of affection begins. Now, there was a theory back during the 1700s that the holiday was also established to quash a Roman holiday called Lupercalia, which actually has to do with fertility. But it's actually, that theory has been pretty much downplayed or rejected by modern biblical scholars, come to find out.
What's it called?
It's called Lupercalia.
Lupercalia.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a Roman holiday where they literally would run around the streets of Rome and other Roman cities, basically trying to attract or be spontaneous and things of that nature. It's kind of interesting to explain because they hit people with stuff and they're flirting with people at the same time. It's pretty wild.
Like hit them with
parts of pelts.
Pelts?
Yeah, you had dog pelts and goat pelts.
Is that where we get the term, I'm going to pelt you with a whatever? Probably not. Okay, so go ahead.
But fast forwarding in time into the 19th century, Valentine's has been established by this point as a day of communication with loved ones, but more specifically for developing romantic relationships. And Valentine cards or notes date to about 1400, but as we saw with a lot of the Christmas traditions, it's really when the English become involved that it really starts to spread. Of course, a lot of those Christmas traditions start in Germany and southern Germany, but once the English take it and run with it, it really starts to spread everywhere. Now, in the 19th century, particularly the late 18th and into the 19th century, we have cards made with lace or decorated with it. And Valentines begin to be made out of pressed paper called lace paper by about the mid-19th century.
Okay.
And this is when Valentines and note-giving begins to be mass-produced. Now, the trend jumped the pond from England to over here in a large part due to a businesswoman by the name of Esther Howland, in 1848. She had received an English Valentine, so one of these really intricate lace Valentines, the year before and wanted to replicate them as best she could. And she starts a cottage industry here in the United States. In 48, gets a 1848, gets a bunch of her friends together. They start making these pressed lace, or again, the paper lace Valentines. Now, she's got to actually import a lot of those materials to make these Valentines from England. We're not making them in the States yet, but she's getting her friends together. They're making these Valentines, and they're selling them. And they prove to be so popular that she'll not only recruit her friends, but she starts a whole business on this, and she begins advertising as early as 1850 in the newspapers for the sale of these things. Her in-home assembly line eventually expanded to a nearly $100,000 industry.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot for back then.
Yeah. And she's going to be able to retire by 1881.
Good for her.
Yep. She sells her business to her primary competitor, George C. Whitney and his company. The Whitney Company was in business from 1866 to 1942. By 1888, they were the largest Valentine producer in the United States. The Whitney Company produced lace paper domestically. He actually brought over the tools from England to begin producing that pressed paper here, stateside. And so he's going to be the big player in Valentine's cards and notes into the late 19th and into the 20th century. And because I'd called it a Hallmark holiday when we were first discussing this, I figured I'd look into that. Come to find out, the Hall brothers that start the Hallmark card company began in 1907 as the Norfolk Postcard Company and became Hall Brothers in 1908, which it remained so until 1954 when it became Hallmark. So
That's when their brother Mark joined them.
it's actually 3 brothers, but I don't think any of them are Mark.
Oh, okay.
But that was...
Or Groucho joined them.
Right.
But that would be Mark's. Never mind. Okay, so now when we get to the Civil War, though, what is going on with the culture as a whole? How is I was always under the impression that people in earlier times married more for practical reasons. Like a woman needed a man in order to survive because
or he needed her dowry or something like that.
It was a transactional thing. It was a business thing, and then the higher up, the higher up in society you go, it's more of a unifying of kingdoms type of thing, or whatever, power grabs and things like that. In Victorian America, what's love got to do with it, if you will?
Fantastic.
Thank you. Did love have anything to do with it?
Actually, I think it does. There are, of course, still power marriages and marriages for influence and things of that nature, particularly, like you said, with the higher up in society and politicians and whatnot. But it really seems like especially by the mid-19th century, folks are following, and I apologize for the sappiness, but following their heart, if you will, when it comes to relationships. We've got many accounts of defying one's parents to go with this boy or this girl, or marrying up or down in society for love or for the affection they find for somebody else. So I don't think we're having it quite as tight-laced, if you will, by the mid-19th century as it had been in the past. And some of the accounts that I've brought with me today, I think, reflect that as well.
I always wondered with arranged marriages, or not necessarily arranged, but marriages that fall within a certain boundaries of, say, a religion or the society that you're living in. Because you hear stories of some of these relationships that are, well, their families wanted them to get married, and it was a small town, and then they got married. But then you read some of the letters that they send each other, and they're very warm, and there is love in those letters and things like that. I wonder if it's do you grow? Can people grow to love someone in that sense? And can they? Or is it just that, I have no choice, and I have this need and this ability to love, and this is what I'm stuck with, so I might as well, write these sappy letters and stuff like that, because I got to get it somewhere.
Well, there is that, of course.
What, Eric?
No, I was going to say, wow, this is turning philosophical really fast.
Well, no, I mean, that's just, and not that you would have, I wouldn't expect you to have the answer to this, Matt, but it's just something I always wondered about that time is, if I was like forced to be with someone and I really didn't love them, I couldn't pretend. I couldn't.
True, but you're also not being forced to do it. And that's like you just said.
At this point, I wish I was.
If you are in a situation where you're being forced, you don't have another option. This is somebody you have to live with, and in many times expected to make a family with. And there's been many arranged marriages that we've seen from royal families throughout Europe and elsewhere where that affection does eventually come into play, because this is the person you've been saddled with for the rest of your life, is supposed to be.
Right.
And you might as well try.
Yeah, well, right, and that's what I'm thinking.
This is not me promoting the idea of arranged marriages.
I'm sure nobody thinks that. Don't worry.
Okay.
You're okay.
But I'm saying that affection, even within a very hard situation like an arranged marriage, can exist.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thing to study, and people much smarter than myself, and probably even yourself, have studied this stuff for a very long time, and they probably have the answer to these questions. And
Well,
so,
to Eric's point, I mean, I'm not a philosopher or somebody who has done a lot of research on the intricacies of relationships.
yeah, no, I know.
Not a psychologist either, so.
No, I just know that they're very intricate and hard to maintain. So so now, if you're in the regular old non-military civilian society in the 1850s and going into the 1860s, I'm a guy, you're a girl. I'm interested in you. What do I do? What's the courtship? Do we know? Did you get it? I should have asked you this before. Did you get into this?
A little bit.
Okay, a little bit's all I want. A little bit. What is it like courting someone? What was the courtship thing
It's not
all about?
entirely as far off to today as what we think of. Yes.
So swipe right, swipe left.
Not quite to that extent,
Okay.
especially now that we're in this quarantine world of ours. But you meet people in your town or your village or especially church.
Oh,
Okay. The social engagements you're doing are oftentimes through either your house of worship, whatever that is, maybe gatherings within the town, or through your family. And that's oftentimes how the families really come involved with this because, you've got a young man as your son. I have this young lady as a daughter. We've been doing very well with our commercial transactions. These two people are of a similar age. Maybe we should make a convenient location for them to meet up. Or you would have... Dating's not really the right term, but you would have these chaperoned engagements where the young people were to meet each other and have a chance to develop some sort of relationship.
Okay. Under the watchful eye.
Under the watchful eye, yes.
So when the war starts, though, you got a lot of husbands going off. You got a lot of boyfriends that are going off.
You've got a lot of overnight sweethearts being made.
Overnight sweethearts being made. The classic story.
I'm going off to war. Honey,
It might be my last chance to steal a kiss.
Right.
Yeah.
Or may a lot of requests of may I write you. That's kind of an interesting thing too. Somebody you've kind of had a fancy for, but it hasn't really developed into anything, but suddenly you're going off to war.
Perfect excuse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd really like to write you. I'd love to have somebody back here at home beyond Ma and Pa.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, and I understand that. And so the war, they go off to the war. You hear, and at the end of this show, we'll play the Sullivan Ballou letter, which is a very popular one.
Fantastic example.
Beautiful letter. Kind of not it's kind of called into question, though, isn't it?
I've heard that.
Yeah, because there's like 30 versions of it.
Right.
So which is the original?
Yeah.
But so the soldiers are writing home. The wives and girlfriends, the sweethearts, whatever, at home are writing to the soldiers. Lots of writing going on.
Lots of writing going on. We're going to touch on that.
Yeah. Now, I mean, today, people they lack the ability to write an innuendo. They lack the ability to cloak whatever they want to say or think or feel or whatever. They just come right out and say it in the most caveman-like of terms possible. But back in those days, they said everything and anything that we would say today, except they said it in, for the most part, much nicer ways, right?
I'm glad you caveated that with the for the most part, because
Yes.
you're right. We do have this idea that Victorian society was much more proper and would cloak desires or insults in much more flowery is probably not the right term, but more developed verbiage. But on the flip side of that, I've got one for later in this conversation that's very blunt.
Okay, we can't wait to get to that one. So right now, let's just give a warning to anybody listening with the kids. It's going to get ugly later, but we're going to bleep, so don't worry.
I'm pretty sure all the kids ran off as soon as you started singing.
That's fair.
Oh, Eric.
Oh, laugh track.
All right, folks, shut up. Okay, so now back to the show. Okay, guys, over there.
They're really excited.
Yeah. They really like when Eric has those zingers. So let's get into that. Let's get into or is there somewhere else you wanted to go first before we get into that?
No, I was just going to do a rundown of what's going on during the war years.
Do it.
Okay. So February 14th, of course, Valentine's Day. It is an established holiday by the 1860s, and February 14th, 1861, the very doorstep of the war, if you will, Lincoln is on his way to D.C. Okay, he's still winding his way through the Midwest and parts of the lower New England area, giving speeches at all of his stops. He's making his way.
Because back then, he was inaugurated on the 3rd of March. Is that right?
Yes.
It wasn't January
3rd or 4th
20th.
of March. Correct.
Right.
Yeah, it's in early March.
Okay, early March.
By 1862, of course, we're now into the war. On the Cumberland River, we've got federal gunboats, including 4 city-class ironclads that will bombard Fort Donelson in an attempt to force the surrender of that Confederate fort. The vessels will be badly damaged in this bombardment, and Flag Officer Foote is badly wounded in the process. He'll be mortally wounded. Confederate officers at Donelson decide to make an attempt at a breakout for the next day. So that's leading up to the Battle of Fort Donelson. Bowling Green, Kentucky is captured by federal troops, and skirmishing at Cumberland Gap, Kentucky, as well as Cane Creek, Missouri, would occur in 62. In Western Virginia in 1862, we have one of my favorite little fights that never gets talked about called the Affair at Bloomery Gap that occurs, where Brigadier General Frederick W. Lander and his staff charge a foraging party at Bloomery Gap and succeed in capturing 65 men, about 225 cattle, and almost 200 wagons. And his after-action report on this sounds like all bluster until you read the Confederate reports, and they say pretty much the same thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, by 1863, the Queen of the West, one of these Western gunboats, she's going to capture a Confederate gunboat called the New Era, number 5. It kind of implies what happened to the other new eras. But the Queen is forced later in that day to be abandoned when she is trapped under some Confederate guns. And she goes aground while fighting Confederate land batteries, and the crew will transfer to the recently captured New Era number 5. So we've got fighting on the western waters and skirmishing in Union Mills, Virginia, and a scouting expedition to Leesburg, of all places. Now in 64, we have Meridian, Mississippi. Now, are you guys familiar with Meridian at all?
Just by name.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about it.
This one's pretty important because it's going to be captured by federal troops on February 14th, and it is seen by many historians as a precursor to the March to the Sea. Okay? The depot town of Meridian underwent meticulous destruction for 5 days, with federal troops targeting Confederate depots, storehouses, arsenals, hospitals, offices, and hotels. Approximately 115 miles of railroad would be destroyed on February 14th, 1864, and along with 61 bridges and 20 locomotives. So Sherman is testing this idea of destruction.
Mm-hmm. And he decides to do it on Valentine's Day.
Right.
How loving.
Also in 64, we've got Gainesville, Florida is captured after a brief skirmish. Additional skirmishing would occur in Larkinsville, Alabama, Brentsville, Virginia, as well as Ross Landing and Scott's Farm in Arkansas. So we've got fighting across the board by this time.
Okay.
And then finally, of course, in 1865, we have the ongoing siege of Petersburg that is still occurring. Sherman's Carolinas campaign is moving towards Columbia, the capital of South Carolina, and skirmishing would occur at Wolfe's Plantation and Gunter's Bridge on the North Edisto River. Jefferson Davis advises that Charleston, South Carolina, be held as long as possible at this point as well, on February 14th, 1865. So the end is near, but there's still significant fighting and maneuvering going on in February of 65.
So while all this fighting is going on throughout the war, what are the soldiers and their sweethearts and wives saying to each other? Or are they, or even writing in their diaries or something like that?
Sure. we have a lot of letter writing going on at this time, of course, throughout the war years. And I kind of wanted to start by setting the stage with John Billings out of the 10th Massachusetts Battery, out of his classic work, Hardtack and Coffee, speaking to just how important and consuming the letter writing can be. And he wrote, of course, all wrote letters more or less, but there were a few men who seemed to spend the most of their spare time in this occupation. Especially was this in the earlier part of a man's war experience. The side or end strip of a hardtack box held on the knees constituted a writing desk on which his operation was performed. So these guys are writing, in many cases nearly constantly, using whatever surface they could to write upon. We got to remember that both armies are at least 80% literate. Okay. The vast majority of both armies can read and write to some extent. Yes, we have some very good examples of soldiers who are asking their officers or their NCOs for help to write home to Ma or write home to their sweethearts. But the vast majority of these troops can write to some extent. And they're utilizing that. And they're utilizing the fact that both sides have a mail system. The United States Post Office, of course, is still in operation throughout the Civil War. Obviously, it doesn't extend beyond the Potomac there for a while. But as the armies move south, the mail's going to move with them. And, of course, the further they get away from depots and places of and the cities of operation and stuff like that, it takes longer. But for the most part, especially in the north, the mail's pretty effective.
Yeah, and I can understand, you're missing home or you're missing someone, just sitting down writing to them. It kind of can make you feel like, not like they're there, but that you're talking to them and that there's something to it. I mean, I'll sit down because nobody likes to write letters anymore. I like writing letters still. So I'll sit down and I'll write a letter to someone. Mm-hmm. I'll never send it to them. I have so many letters to people that I've never sent.
That's very Lincoln of you.
Well, it's mainly because they would never write back. Just because it's not their thing. Like they don't have the time. They have a million of reasons why. They don't have the time. They don't know how to write. They can't spell anymore. Whatever.
If I receive a letter, not necessarily a card or something, but if I receive a letter, I do try to write back.
Yeah, which is good. You should. It's polite. So what are they saying in some of these letters?
Well, one of the ones I wanted to start you with, and first off, Little Truth in Advertising, I found very few direct references to Valentine's Day in the letters and journals of these soldiers. I do have a lot of great examples of more loving comments and things like that from various parts of the war years, both sides, and I tried to get them around February as much as I can, but this first one actually comes from November 8th of 1861.
That's fine, man. I mean, this is about love in the Civil War. Love. So it's okay.
Love.
It's okay that it doesn't have to be specifically written on Valentine's Day, so go ahead.
Now, this is Robert H. King of Company E, 54th Virginia Infantry. And he wrote, this is a very quick quote, but very common to the time. He's writing to his wife, Louisa, and he ends one of his letters with, "It pains my heart to think of leaving," though he didn't quite spell that right, "you all, yours till death." And unfortunately, it would be until death because he is going to die of typhoid fever on April 1st, 1863. What's interesting, particularly about his letters and some of the other items he sends home, is that he actually sends home Valentines.
Like those little lace things you're talking?
He actually made apparently while he was in one of the hospitals that he was being held up in, what's known as a basket weave folded card, as well as puzzle purse cards. Now, basically, he took strips of paper and weaved them together to make a design when you unfolded it. And when you unfold this folded card, it actually has two people sitting separate from each other that appear to be crying.
Oh,
so it's a very touching homemade card.
Yeah.
The puzzle purse actually looks like a origami throwing star, or almost like a flattened cootie catcher. And the center.
Oh, what?
Oh, is that a term you guys don't know?
A cootie catcher?
Yeah, that's a new one to me.
Yeah, I've never heard that.
Sorry.
Is that thing where you put 4 fingers in it and you
Yes.
make it? Okay,
That's
I know
exactly
what
what
you're
that
talking
is.
Oh, the thing where the girls used to predict the future.
Exactly.
My daughter's obsessed with making those things.
Wait, that goes back that far?
Well, again, this is probably closer to
thought my generation created that.
an origami star.
Okay.
But it looks very similar to a flattened cootie catcher.
Yeah.
But the center part of that star.
Hold on. Why do you call it a cootie catcher?
I don't know, man. That's what they called them when I was growing up.
Okay. Were you in Michigan at that time? Okay. We didn't call them that in New Jersey. We had cootie shots. Did you give each other cootie shots?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Line,
you had to
line,
get
dot,
that.
dot. Now you got your cootie shot? Yeah.
Well, ours was circle, circle, dot, dot.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. Whatever. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's all tapping it out.
Yeah.
But it would have the center of this folded card, again, kind of looking like a star shape. You could open it up and there'd be sometimes a little goodie in there. Maybe a little piece of candy or another tiny note or a lock of hair or stuff like that.
Okay. All right.
So that's going to kind of start us off. Now, this is a bit more in-depth. This is actually from the book Letters to Laura, a Confederate Surgeon's Impression of 4 Years of War. It was written on November 21st, 1861 by Dr. Urban G. Owen of the 4th Tennessee Infantry. He writes, "Dear Laura, this world seems to me a vast desert of sand, and you like the only green spot around which my whole heart's delight and sweet memory of you likes to linger. Deprive me of your fond love and ever watchful and loving sympathy, and I would be a perfect blank." So he's really laying it out there.
So he bleeped himself there.
No. He says, I would be a perfect
like a blank. Okay, gotcha.
He would have no personality, no feeling, so forth and so on. Yeah, no,
If it
he's
weren't
not
for
bleeping
her.
himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, that's very poetic there
Exactly.
and romantic.
Very deep.
Yeah.
And again, this is a better educated gentleman. He's a doctor. But you do see that even with folks who didn't go to medical school or didn't have higher education, they're trying to express themselves as best they can. And sometimes it's more blunt than others, but they're trying. Now, I can just kind of keep going through these if you like.
Keep going.
Okay?
Yeah. I like this.
Now, this comes from a conversational book, and I love these when we've got not only the letters, but also the responses.
Yes, those are good when you got the back and forth.
Right.
Yeah.
This is A Handful of Providence, the Civil War letters of Lieutenant Richard Goldthwait, New York Volunteers, and Ellen Goldthwait, so his wife.
Let's hope.
Right. February 1st, 1862. He's writing from Fort McHenry, so not too terribly far from here, with the 3rd New York Infantry. "You must write me and let me know all that is going on with you and all at home and how you enjoy the winter and how cold it is to sleep alone this winter." So again, kind of implying there a little bit more intimate with your wife. You can do that.
They're not in separate beds when they're at home like on Dennis the Menace and all those old 50s shows. Okay,
That's
got
right.
it.
Now, on February 16th, 1862, Ellie Goldthwait of Rexford Flats, Saratoga County, New York, would reply to her husband, and he had asked her in the previous letter also about Captain Blanchard, a young man, a captain who was in the town and was also attached to the regiment. "Dick, you asked why I do not like Captain Blanchard. Well, I will tell you. I have often heard of him being a great admirer of the women. I don't know, but I have always heard too much of his deviltry for me to like him." So he's got a reputation. So the Mrs. Goldthwait was letting her husband know that that's why she doesn't care for this guy.
She's like, stay away from him, Bobcat.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Now, what's interesting about these letters, sorry, I dipped back from the
Go ahead. I
microphone.
was laughing about Bobcat Goldthwait, and I didn't think. Go ahead.
What's interesting about these letters and diary entries is not only how personal they can be, but also some of the traditions that are wrapped around not necessarily the holidays, but this idea of relationships and intimacy and things of that nature.
Like what? What do you mean?
Well, I'm referring specifically to Sarah Morgan Dawson. She wrote A Confederate Girl's Diary, or it was published as A Confederate Girl's Diary. And this comes from January 29th, 1863. She is in Louisiana with her sister and her cousin. They're upstairs basically getting ready to end the evening when it's announced that there's 3 Confederate officers at the door, and they'd like to come in and spend time with the ladies and whatnot, more pleasant company. So she talks about getting herself done up again, basically, getting her dress on and everything else and going downstairs. Then she goes on to say, someone suggested calling the spirits, which game I had imagined played out long ago, and we derived a great deal of amusement from it. 6 of us sat around a small table and invoked them with the usual ceremony. And she doesn't actually say what that is. There was certainly no trick played. Every finger was above the board, so this is similar
like a Ouija
to
board.
Similar, yes. Every finger was above the board, and all feet sufficiently far from the single leg to ensure fair play. So nobody's kicking the table legs, is what she's saying. Every rap seemed to come exactly from the center of the table. When asked if there was a writing medium present, it indicated Captain C, and then she blanks out the rest of the name. Our first question, of course, was, how long before peace? 9 months was written. Which foreign nation would recognize us first? France, then England in 8 months. And then, of course, they dive into the more personal questions. Who will Miriam marry? That's her sister. Captain of a battery. Who? We all shouted. Captain C.E. Fenner was written again. When? In 10 months. I believe Captain C, to be honest about it. He seemed to have no control over his hand, and his arm trembled until it became exceedingly painful. Of course, I do not believe in spiritualism, but there is certainly something in it one cannot understand. So I did a little digging.
Very clever on his part.
Well, it is, because I did a little digging here on C.E. Fenner. He's a captain of a Louisiana artillery battery.
Oh, okay, cool.
Interestingly, though, in that diary, she has annotated it, and she says the spirits were mistaken on this part. Miriam marries such and such.
Well, he tried. You got to give him credit for trying.
He tried to pull in the supernatural.
Yeah. I guess they weren't that gullible, those ladies.
Now, in 1863, very close to Valentine's Day, February 18th, we have a regiment that you and I both know pretty well here, the 118th Pennsylvania Corn Exchange.
Sure, yeah, oh yeah.
Captain Francis A. Donaldson of Company A writes about a different kind of love, the love of comradeship and his fellows.
Okay.
Dear brother, well, I am again with the Army after the happiest 10 days of my life spent with you all at home. So he was at home during Valentine's Day. So that's kind of nice. I had a grand reception. All seemed so glad to have me back again that it was at this time the homesickness began to leave me. There could be no mistaking the embrace of genuine affection by John Thomas, who's a lieutenant in his company, and they're actually tent mates. Poor old fellow. They tell me he had been taken... they tell me he was like a calf without his mother. He would just drift around and didn't know what to do or who to do it with. He hasn't left me since. Love to Auntie. Tell her, and then he underlines this, that I am at home again. And I am well taken care of by my man Friday, George Slow. George Slow is actually a self-emancipated gentleman from around the area of, I believe, Charlestown.
Self-emancipated?
He's an escaped slave.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. From around the area of, I believe, Charlestown, West Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, he had joined up with the 118th fairly early on and has been working as Donaldson's kind of in-camp helper, servant, however you want to phrase it.
Cook.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's again, we've got some real good examples of affection and love there, but this is love of comradeship.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on around at this time with that sort of thing as well. This particular one was kind of interesting. This actually deals with a bit of a love triangle.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting.
Yep, coming from your home state.
New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy. There's lots of love triangles in New Jersey.
This one was found by one of my research volunteers initially at Monocacy
Okay.
Battlefield, and we've actually since expanded, on this research, on this research, and had an exhibit about it in the museum for a little while.
Thank you for knowing the difference between expound and expand, by the way. All right. So then, New Jersey. Okay. So what unit?
14th.
14th New Jersey.
Yep, the Frederick or Monocacy Regiment.
And then who's back at home? I'm assuming the wife.
Potential girl.
Oh, potential girl. Okay.
Yep. Now, what's interesting is that the other gentleman in this triangle is not from a New Jersey regiment. 10th Vermont.
Vermont?
Uh-huh.
Well, how does he know this girl?
That's a great question. It took us a lot of research on this. Come to find out, born in Vermont, had gone to school in New York, and was heavily involved in the church in New York. And we believe the three of them probably met via the church.
Interesting. Where in New Jersey are they from?
Honestly, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I will find that out for you.
All right. Well, no, but so I'm just curious. Okay, so go ahead.
Now, the gentleman writing, this is his diary from 63. It's Sergeant James M. Reed of the 10th Vermont, and he writes between September and the end of the year in his diary for 63, he mentions Kiz. Keziah is her full name, but she's known as Kiz to her friends. And he is really interested in this gal. He mentions her 41 times between September and the end of the year in his diary.
Maybe a little
entries.
obsessed.
Perhaps a touch. On December 9th, 1863, he writes, "Tonight received a journal and letter from Kiz. The latter very pleasant and ready. Poor child. She wants to see Ellis. Don't blame her. Lias wants to see Kiz." Lias is the other guy.
Okay, wait. I'm confused here. Who's Ellis?
He's the other guy.
The other guy.
Yep.
And Lias is the other guy?
Lias is his nickname.
What? Okay, gotcha.
Elias.
It's not Ellis. It's Elias.
Yep.
What is the name of the man who wrote this letter?
James Reed.
James. So James is writing. It's not a letter. It's a diary entry.
It's a diary entry. Yep.
And he's writing that Missy. What's her name? Kiz.
Yep.
Kiz.
Keziah is her full name.
Okay, so she wants to see the other guy.
Yep.
And James is saying, "Yeah, I don't blame her. He's hot."
Well, he doesn't say that in so many words, but he says he doesn't blame her.
Okay, but he doesn't say why.
Right.
Okay, continue.
Home for the holidays, December 19th, 1863, visited with Kiz, and he would do so on the 19th, the 20th, and the 21st. So he's going to see her a lot.
So James sees her a lot when he's home.
Yep. On December 20th, specifically, he writes in his diary...
Wait, hold on. James is the New Jersey guy or the Vermont guy?
He's the Vermont guy.
He's the Vermont guy.
Yep.
So he's going home to New Jersey.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So he... does he live? Do we know? Does he live in New Jersey? I mean, he's in the 10th Vermont.
He's actually, I believe, living in New York when the war breaks out.
Living in New York.
Yeah, so
and he
he's
joins a Vermont regiment.
Correct. Because it's his home state.
So they must be right across the river from New York
That's what I'm
City
guessing.
or right over the border from upstate, something like that,
Right.
if they're that close. Okay, go ahead.
Now, on December 20th, he wrote, after that went and took Kiz to church, afterward took her home, and then, well, what then? Asked the graves that yawn and the witches that appear about this time.
Whoa.
So he's self-censoring in his diary. Yeah. That was very interesting. No idea what happened.
Well, you never know who that diary is going to be seen by.
Right. I mean, 3 guys are reading about it here in
You never know when your diary is going to end up on a podcast.
in 2021.
Right. It was very smart of him, but I think we can understand. I think we can infer what he was talking about.
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, in those days, maybe it was just holding hands.
Sure. But,
You know.
yeah.
But a man doesn't hold hands and tell.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, on December 24th, of course, Christmas Eve, he writes, buying odds and ends, including a cape and muff and wristlet for Kiz's Christmas. Visited mother after supper, called on Mr. Richard, for an hour and a half. Fair outing, fooled away 5.5 hours, and late saw Kiz home. After 12 p.m., bade her Merry Christmas and gave her the furs. Poor child, she wasn't expecting them. They were too nice.
Oh, it's a little humble brag there. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing she didn't give him anything.
He doesn't say so.
Nothing worse. Like this year at Christmas time, I received a present in the mail from a dear friend who I did not know we were exchanging gifts this year.
That's tough.
Yeah, it is tough because I had just put in the mail the day before a letter that I wrote. Well, I made my own card. But it was, I took a piece of parchment paper and I folded it in half like a card would. And then I wrote my own little card with my own little message.
That sounds like a gift to me.
Yeah, and it's called a Hallmat card. And it was basically because I think Hallmark cards, to get a card, I think is almost insulting. Somebody gives me a card, unless it's, a generic.
I'll keep that in mind.
Don't get me a card. Make me a card with construction paper or something else.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for that Christmas card, by the way, that was clearly purchased. Now I know where I rate.
Thanks for a great year. And then just a stamp. He didn't even sign it.
It's a stamped signature. No, okay. Because I had a lot of people to send that card to, so I bought a packet of cards.
No, I understand. Don't worry. I get it.
The gift was that I paid for your tintype. That was the...
Oh, well, that's nice.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah, okay. You see, you took your tintype before I got to put it in the card, so you didn't get the full gift that everybody else got. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, I send this letter card, Hallmark card, with my own stick figure manger scene that I drew on it and everything like that.
Nice.
And
that one.
And the day after I send it, I get in the mail a gift, like an actual gift from this person, and I felt horrible. And I said, I didn't know we were exchanging gifts. Like, you're going to think I'm such a schlub from what I sent you, but I just sent you this as a token of, and
handmade goes a long way.
Well, not compared to a $40 bottle of whiskey.
Well, okay.
Come on.
That's also handmade.
It is. Yeah, it's from Mason-Dixon. But, yeah, so I mean that feeling of getting a gift when when you don't have one, you're not expecting one on a holiday. It's one thing if it's random, I can accept that, but it's a holiday, and then it's almost like I don't know. It's awkward when somebody does that.
And I honestly wonder if she felt awkward about it too. James Reed here does visit her briefly on Christmas Day, but he makes just a quick note about it in his diary. On the December 26th, though, he wrote, after supper, I went to see Kiz and say goodbye. He's getting ready to go back to the Army. She went down with her to the choir meeting, then back. Stayed very early. Both got back. Had a good long chat and left very tired and sleepy. So they've been probably working some things out.
And you don't have those good long chats if you don't really like the person,
Right.
Or you're not considering at least liking them.
I have a feeling that it was her probably saying that she's moving on or it's not really meant to be, because on December 27th, Eve ran up and said the same to Kiz, meaning goodbye again. She wept not. This is the last time Keziah is referenced in James Reed's diary.
Okay.
Yeah, I think she basically told him...
She said, hey, James, thanks for the furs, but I want Elias.
Both James and Elias are going to fight at and survive the Battle of Monocacy on July 9th, 1864.
But while that battle is going on, they're chasing each other around the battlefield, like in the movies, right? Settling their own personal scores while...
Interesting, that didn't make it into the official reports.
Oh, no?
Now, Reed, sadly, will be mortally wounded at Petersburg during the final assault on April 2nd.
James Reed, right? James
Reed,
yeah.
He's
the Vermont boy.
mortally wounded, the Vermont boy, at Petersburg on April 2nd, 65. During the Union breakthrough, he's going to be promoted to brevet captain for gallantry of his actions and dies on the 6th. So he doesn't quite make it to the end of the war. Keziah P. Martin would marry Quartermaster Sergeant Elias D. Smith of the 14th New Jersey.
There you go. Jersey boy wins out.
On September 13th, 1865, when he musters out of the service. They had 5 children, but only one girl, Jessie Jewel Smith, born in 1869, lived beyond infancy. And then Keziah dies in 1895. Elias lives until 1924, and they're both buried in Jersey.
And does it say where in Jersey?
Evergreen Cemetery in Elizabeth.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's North Jersey.
Okay.
Well, not Evergreen Cemetery in Elizabeth specifically, but Elizabeth is not far from where I grew up, and it is North Jersey. So New York's not inaccessible, New York City.
Right.
So yeah, okay, well, that makes sense then. I mean, provided that's where they all started from. I don't know. They might have settled in Elizabeth.
Right.
You wouldn't want to do that today, but back then you did. Actually, Elizabeth's not that bad now, is it? I don't remember. Anyway,
no.
What do you remember, Eric?
Nothing. I avoid North Jersey like the plague.
Yeah, me too. Except I have family there, so at least twice a year I have to go back. If I could,
Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah, basically. All right.
Certainly not on Valentine's Day.
No, I don't go back on. So what now do we have? We finished their story. What's another story you have? Do you have just pure unadulterated love, kindness, and all that jazz? Do you have any of that?
I do. That one is a triangle, a bit more dramatic.
Yeah, I like that story.
This comes from Dr. William Child of the 5th New Hampshire Infantry, and he's stationed at Point Lookout, Maryland at this time. January 29th, 1864, he's writing the closing of what was many, many letters to his wife, Caroline, known as Carrie. And he wrote, "I must say good night. I will endeavor to be good and to do nothing that you will not approve. I do not know what to do about coming home. If I could have my family with me all the time, I would not go home at present. Good night. I think of you daily and often dream of you. They are always good and pleasant dreams too. But love is always with you in such dreams. Kisses to you and love. Good night. Yours as ever, William." So there's a very deep and very much lamenting not being with his family at that point.
Yeah.
Particularly his wife.
See, that's nice, though. That's a nice little sentiment there. Thinking of the wife and kids and wanting to be with them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Most men today are like, please, I wish there was a war so I can get away from the wife and kids.
I would hope not most, but some certainly. This one actually is coming right towards the end of the war. It's actually written on Valentine's Day, 1865. It's from Joseph C. Morris of Company F of the Phillips Legion Infantry. "Moments appear days to me, and a day an age of misery and woe, when I cannot behold your beloved face. Why have we passion, if upon the first development of their genuine tenderness they must be curbed and checked by the arbitrary rules of war?"
Beautiful.
Now, it's interesting that he wrote specifically the arbitrary rules of war, because you could almost say that the arbitrary rules of society are somewhat checking genuine tenderness and passions of the day as well.
Yeah, lots of arbitrary rules going on. Mm-hmm. But I guess he would think the rules of war are arbitrary because he just grew up in that society, so he doesn't realize how arbitrary they may be.
Right, exactly. And he was writing
What does arbitrary mean? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
He was writing that to Sylvan Braymond of Standardville, Virginia. So he is writing home to a sweetheart at that point.
Her name was Sylvan.
Sylvanie.
Sylvanie.
Sylvanie? Okay.
I guess. I've never heard that before. Eric, what does that sound like to you? Sylvanie?
Spell it again? Oh, let me see.
Just look at it.
Yeah.
Sylvanie.
Sylvanie.
It's interesting.
It is an
They
interesting
had some
name.
names back then.
They did. They did have some names.
Sylvanie. All right.
And Keziah from before.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a woman.
Was. Absolutely.
I would think that would be a man's name, Keziah. But I guess when they're so weird, it doesn't matter. right?
Well, and there's a lot of Old Testament being drawn into these names too.
Yeah.
So Thiliphius Holmes is one of my favorite Confederate officers for his name. And I probably butchered
What would they have called him for short?
Theo, probably.
Theo.
Talking about Theophilus?
Yes. See, I butchered it.
There's a Theophilus in the 2nd U.S. Cavalry as well. Theophilus Rodenbaugh.
Oh, but we don't care about cavalry here, Eric, do we? Because they're stupid and they have butter knives,
They are.
right?
They are.
So it doesn't matter that there's a felonious monk in the 2nd U.S. Cavalry.
Felonious monk.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
I said felonious.
I heard felonious.
Did I say? Okay, I did say felonious. Go ahead.
I just kind of want to wrap it up with my direct quotes, if you will. The June 22nd, 1865. So the war is wrapping
Coming
up.
to an
It's
end,
in
right.
its final days. This comes from Captain Roland W. Jones of the 1st Mississippi Battalion Sharpshooters.
Go ahead.
He's in General Hospital No. 2 in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's been there since the Battle of Nashville. So he's writing to his soon-to-be wife. I console myself with the reflection that this state of things will soon be over, and at no distant day I will be able to claim you as my own, and in ecstatic happiness that will then be mine, forget all of my past trials and sufferings. Captain Roland is referencing his forthcoming marriage to Elizabeth Fields Colston, which occurred in December of 1865.
Wow.
And that comes from Williamson County. The Civil War is seen through the female experience.
Okay. Is there... or keep going. You got more there?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
I did want to touch on a couple of stories from right around our area, particularly the Frederick and Boonesboro area of Maryland.
Sure.
This is marriages through tragedy, or from
Oh,
tragedy.
yes.
During the American Civil War, the town of Boonesboro is going to be captured a couple of times, Boonesboro, Maryland. And Confederate surgeon Dr. John Mutius Gaines was twice captured in Boonesboro, Maryland, following the battles of South Mountain in 1862 and the Confederate retreat from Gettysburg in 1863. He's going to be captured because he's staying in town to deal with the wounded.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he'd initially been assigned to the 8th Virginia Infantry. Gaines had remained with his wounded soldiers in Boonesboro after those battles. He returned to Boonesboro, however, in 1865 and married a local woman, Helen Jeanette Smith, whom he had likely met during the war. Now, sadly, Helen is going to pass away in 1868, but Dr. Gaines remained and remarried.
Okay.
He's actually going to remarry another local lady, Susan Mariah Wrench, in 1870, and they had 3 daughters together. Dr. Gaines and both of his wives now rest in Rose Hill Cemetery in Hagerstown, Maryland.
Wow.
So their whole relationship developed because of the war.
Yeah.
I mean, right through her town. Now, we do have several examples of those. I think even some examples from around Gettysburg of that as well. But Captain Chauncey Harris of the 14th New Jersey, he is going to be widowed shortly before he enlisted, and he's a single father. So he's got a daughter at home, but he still goes off to the war. He may have started seeing Frederick resident Clementine America Baker when the 14th New Jersey was stationed at Camp Hooker near Monocacy Junction in 1863. At the Battle of Monocacy, Harris took command of the regiment following the wounding of his commanding officer, but he himself would then be cut down, shot through the breast, and then he is going to be struck again as they're trying to get him out of there. He's going to be hit in the right knee.
Ow.
Yeah. He's eventually going to be sent to Frederick itself, and as you guys know, massive hospital town at the time.
Yeah.
Harris was nursed back to health by Clementine Baker and was discharged from service on December 8, 1864. Harris and Baker later wed. They lived in New Jersey and may have had a couple of daughters together.
May have.
It's a little dicier as to whether or not they had.
Why is it dicey?
I just don't think we've confirmed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the daughters, if they're actually theirs or not.
And then what was we were trying to figure this out before we recorded. What was the it wasn't the Shrivers, the Garlacks.
Yeah,
It was across the street from their houses.
Yeah, the way I remember it was a family living across the street from the Shrivers had a wounded Union soldier that they were caring for, but he dies eventually, and his brother ends up marrying the daughter of the family.
Right, because his family came to be with him while he was convalescing here.
Something like that.
And in doing so, the daughter of the house fell in love with the brother. Oh, I almost had the name. I almost had her name. It was right on the tip of my tongue. I can see her picture. It's going to bug me. But anyway, so that's a little story we have from here in Gettysburg. I think there's another story similar to that as well in Gettysburg. I'm sure there's plenty more, but...
Well, there's a similar one to that from Frederick, too.
Go ahead.
A young soldier, again, fought at Monocacy. He's going to die in one of the homes that were set up as a hospital in Frederick. And the widow who took care of him will eventually marry his father when he comes to collect.
The widow who took care of him would eventually marry his father. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And we don't have a whole lot of details on that one. But again, it's one of these never would have met each other sort of things were it not for the war, were it not for this terrible tragedy.
Yeah. It's always interesting. I always am interested to hear how people meet and then how it turns into a marriage.
Right.
And when it's something like that, it's like you never would have met if it weren't for this war.
Never would have. Exactly.
So then I don't know, though, if that is a glaring detail to me, because then that kind of makes me question the legitimacy of the marriage, or if it, you know what I mean? Like, am I going, well, if it wasn't for this war, you never would have met, so really you don't belong together. But obviously the war was meant to be, and they were meant to meet through the war, so why wouldn't they? But I don't know. I just have a very weird way of looking at things.
Philosophy.
Yeah, I guess. I'm a very philosophical guy. None of it makes any sense, but that's philosophy.
Right. That's accurate.
That's accurate.
Now, I do have, we mentioned earlier the commercialization of Valentine's that had already begun by the time of the Civil War and was really well on its way by the time of the Civil War. I went through newspapers. Every year of the American Civil War, Harper's Weekly has... In 61 and 65, they have two huge full-page celebratory Valentine's Day announcements.
Huh. Okay.
And then the other, there's other advertisements for Valentine's. There's advertisements in other various papers. Lots of poetry being put into the papers, stories relating to Valentine's, things of that nature. I just wanted to read off a few of those, if you're interested.
Absolutely.
This comes out of the Chicago Daily Tribune in January 22nd, 1862. Valentine's for 1862. My stock for the approaching season will be entirely new and will far surpass that of former years. Valentine's single from 1 cent to $20. Comic and sentimental Valentines. Assorted patriotic comic Valentines. Envelopes, cards, writers, etc. So...
Comic Valentines, I like.
Yeah, they're already getting into Snoopy and stuff like that. Harper's Weekly, 1862. Soldier's Valentine packet, price 50 cents. For Valentine's Day, 1862, containing one superb Valentine, retail price 25 cents. One elegant embossed envelope of 3 inches. One elegant embossed Valentine of not 3 inches, 3 cents. One elegant embossed Valentine of 6 cents. One white plain envelope, 1 cent. 3 comic Valentines, 9 cents. 3 white envelopes, 2 cents. And 1 beautiful Valentine card in fancy envelope, 6 cents. Now, these advertisements go on throughout the entire extent of the war and beyond. Obviously, people are trying to make a buck.
Sure.
But they're advertising for the holiday specifically. Now, in the Daily Chronicle and Sentinel in February 6, 1862, this is an Augusta, Georgia newspaper. Someone writes, "When our southern land shall again bask in the broad sunshine of peace and prosperity, mayhap the observance of Valentine's Day will be generally among us." So they're kind of lamenting that it's we're not really seeing it this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The New York Herald on Valentine's Day, 1862. Don't forget your soldier lovers. Keep their courage up with a rousing Valentine. All prices 6 cents to $5 each from the Strong's Valentine Depot.
6 cents to $5. That's quite a quite a range.
Yeah, probably like singles to packs.
Yeah, but still, $5 for, I mean, that's a lot.
It's almost half your wages.
It's half your wages as a soldier, right? Yep. Huh.
This one I found really moving. It's a long poem, so I'm only going to read a part of one of the stanzas. It's from Harper's Weekly in 1863. It's called Only One Man Killed Today. And their hearts are crushed by the news today, only one man killed, so the telegram reads. But from them life's beauty has passed away, and all the glory and triumph gained seems a matter small to the woe blood stained, that in sorrowful strokes, like a tolling bell throbs, only one man killed as a funeral knell. The poem is reinserting this fact that any one killed is a tragedy.
Right, okay.
Yeah. It's saying that, the telegrams and the reports, only one man killed, and we think that's so great, but somebody is paid the price of this war. Some family is broken.
That's the one word when that goes with casualties. It's like, well, how many were killed? Well, only 3.
Yeah.
Only 3?
Yeah.
It's not really only 3.
And the bigger fights when we say, it was only 100 casualties.
Right.
Or 100 fatalities. That's...
Yeah. Only. But that's what happens, though. You the more you read about this stuff, and I think the way it's packaged for a lot of us, at least on a pop history level or on a cultural level, they do make it seem like, what was that thing that Stalin said about
one
statistics?
person's a tragedy.
Yeah, and a millionaire statistic or something like one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic.
Right.
And I think that's true. The higher the number that gets, I don't know, maybe that's a defense mechanism that our brains have so we don't actually think about how horrible that is. But
I think so.
Yeah, one person you could focus on. It's easier to focus on one person and go, but 1,000?
Right.
It's kind of hard to do.
You can't wrap your head around it. Yeah. And I think even Lincoln recognized that. Of course, after Fredericksburg, he refers to the casualties as the terrible arithmetic.
Yes.
When he's crunching the numbers between losses.
Yeah.
And so, I do think it's one of those things where it's hard to wrap your head around the losses when you're just having numbers thrown at you.
Yeah, it's too much.
Now, in Harper's Weekly, 1864, there was a very short Valentine's poem that was written, and I'd like to just read this one off for you. It's called The Lover's Wish.
I'm going to give you some music.
Oh, thank you. I would not be the rose that blooms where gay parterres are spread, nor yet the rosy wreath that twines round beauty's graceful head. No, let me be the rose that wins a glance and smile from thee, when none are by thy beating heart, thy blushing cheek to see. Long treasured for the giver's sake, when nature's charms are past, and claiming still through dry and sere a fond look at the last.
Beautiful, Matt. Beautiful with the music, too.
Oh, yes.
Really.
The accompaniment, thank you. So there's a lot of this going on in the papers at the time, even just little poems, and it's not all about the commercialism of it. Yes, there's a lot of that going on, and far more than I thought I would find initially. But there's a lot of this really touching information. Stories, short stories are being written about little, not only loves, but loves lost on Valentine's or tied into Valentine's.
Yeah, it sounds to me like, at least from what you're presenting here, that it was a almost like it's just a like a general celebration of love. Mm-hmm. You know, the good of it and the pain of it and all of that stuff, everything that came with it. Yeah, like it's not that it wasn't individualized in any way, but I'm saying in general, from what you're talking about, that was in the papers at least, it seems like people were publishing love poems, and that's just, for general consumption, just like songs today. We have love songs today. And it may have been written about someone in particular, but we hear it. We put our own meaning to it, you know?
We put our own names in it sometimes.
Yeah.
Just a few more of the newspaper entries that I thought were interesting. This comes out of the Richmond Whig in February of 1864. Although public attention should be diverted from levity whilst the alarms of war are heard at our very doors, we believe that on the 14th February, a large number of, quote, Valentines will pass through the post office. So they're basically saying the post office is revving up for the Valentine's cards and things like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So even
like we do today.
Right. So even late in the war for Richmond, they're prepared for this.
Interesting.
Coming on February 11th, 1864, out of Holmes County, the Holmes County Farmer, is the name of the newspaper, out of Ohio. We are reminded that Valentine Day is approaching. Tuesday next, the 14th instant, is set aside as the Carnival of Lovers. It is said the birds choose their mates on that day, and it being leap year, is expected that all marriageable girls will select their mates.
Marriageable.
Yeah. And I'm not familiar with that tradition of the ladies asking the guys during a leap year. Are you guys familiar with that?
No, I've never heard that.
Never heard of such.
Oh, sorry. I'm here.
Yeah, this goes back to the whole store-bought Christmas card, too. No, I've never heard of such a thing.
Is it called a Sadie Hawkins dance when the girl...
No, I've heard of that.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Where the girl asks the boy to go. Yeah.
I just didn't get asked, so...
Oh, do they still have them?
You were in high school around 1900?
Right. When you had Sadie Hawkins dances? I thought that was an old thing.
They didn't call it that.
No.
We definitely had a Sadie Hawkins dance when I was in high school.
Did they call it
did?
that?
Yeah, they called it that.
Wow.
Who was Sadie Hawkins?
I have no idea.
Why is she so special?
I have no idea.
Well, that's what the next show is going to be about.
She was probably burned.
Yeah,
as a
and
witch.
she was probably burned as a witch or stoned. Yeah, and then now it's like, oh, let's name a dance after her, and girls can ask.
Can't have any free-thinking women around here.
Oh man, the way they were.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we were just talking about a story. I won't even get into it. It was this long story that this old lady told. Horrible story about a woman who it's just horrible suffering and loneliness her whole life.
And it's a tragedy.
And it is a tragedy. And why did you say that with a smile? You seem so happy.
Because he knows the actual story.
Yeah. Well,
It's many twists and turns.
Many twists and turns, and it's a terrible story. But basically, she's underage, and she goes working in the big city, and she gets taken advantage of by her boss, and pregnant. And they have the baby, and they sell the baby to a family that wants it, and her family doesn't know about it. And years later, she's kind of getting up there in her 20s, and they're afraid she's going to be an old maid. And then she meets this younger man, much younger man, and she falls madly in love with him, and he with her, and they get married. Why are you laughing?
It's just the way you said it. You're like, oh, they put the baby up on eBay, and the highest bidder took it. My God.
Well, I'm trying to just give them the bullet points, and they can go find the story themselves. But anyway, so they fall in love with each other. They get married. I guess it's not a big deal. She's living back with her family now, and they marry and they live in that town. And then finally, I think after a year or two, his family decides, well, maybe we should go see our son's wife and meet her and see them since we weren't there for the wedding. So they come and they visit, and through conversation, they deduce that she is his mother.
Dun, dun, dun.
And then his family says, you're coming home with us. We're going to have this marriage annulled. This is horrible. And her family's like, mother? When did you have a baby? And then when I was 14, and then they ostracized her, and she lived to an old age and died, basically starved to death because people treated her horribly. And it's a great lesson in the what would you say, Matt? The pitfalls of fanaticism.
Yep.
And how fanaticism ruins lives. Okay, Matthew.
On that happy note, I just wanted to wrap up with some of the newspaper stuff I found. It not only is there's all this poetry and little stories and short stories and whatnot about Valentines and lovers and things of that nature, but also sometimes comedy. We saw some of those advertisements mentioning
comics.
Yeah. This comes from Harper's Weekly in 1865, titled A Valentine. And I won't read the whole thing because it's pretty extensive, but it starts out, the turtle doves, they bill and coo, the hen goes cluck, cluck, cluck. The cock cries, aroo, a-caroo, aroo, the drake quacks to the duck. The gander cackles to his goose, compliance hisseth she. And the lark, where Hymen's noose, old fright for you and me. I don't know what that means.
Read that. I didn't understand any of that.
I didn't either. Read it again, but slowly.
Basically, it's the various animals collecting their mates, but they have this whole description of the various animals getting together and young men and young women getting together and little stories about each one, and then they end it with some bad jokes. George, how does your new horse answer? I regret to say that I cannot inform you, for I never asked him a question. Just
oh my God, 19th century dad jokes.
Yeah.
They are,
Yes.
and they're completely out of context. They just slapped him at the end of this, the very last one. Why is a spider a good correspondent?
Why?
Because he drops a line by every post.
Oh, Eric likes it.
Completely at random. No context at all. They just slapped him in there.
Yeah. Well, everybody likes a good joke.
Or a good dad joke.
Yeah.
I'm glad you like that, Eric. I'm very glad you like that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
To kind of wrap things up, though, guys, I did find a few more explicit, if you will, Civil War quotes that I thought you might find interesting, because not only is this a holiday of love,
Right.
but also of lovers.
Hey, you can't have one without the other.
Now we can get into the juicy deeds.
Right. So let's just, any kids in the room, let's give them a countdown. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's not like they'd be able to understand, I'm sure, the cloaked wordage.
Well, and some of them are more cloaked than others. The one is pretty darn blatant.
Would the music be inappropriate now?
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
This one is one of our more...
It was Chopin.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, go ahead.
This is one of our more cloaked, as you put it, quotes. This comes from Second Lieutenant Edwin G. Fay of the 107th New York Company C. Occasionally a woman passes camp, and it is a 3 days wonder. But the women only serve to remind me of you and our separation, and I don't care to see them. That 3 days wonder thing has me wondering what exactly he meant by that. I'm guessing the boys get really excited just to see anything female.
Wow, that's...
That's probably fair, honestly.
Yeah.
So, like, if
I'd
she's
say
around
that's
for
pretty good
3
assessment.
days, then they're all just like, oh.
No,
Oh,
like
what?
they see her and then
And for 3 days, they're all
They
worked up.
can't,
Yeah, there we
exactly.
go.
They can't get it out of their head for 3 days. I think that's what he's saying.
All right, okay.
And
Well,
that comes from a newer work by Jonathan White, Midnight in America, Darkness, Sleep, and the Dreams in the Civil War.
that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, what else you got?
Now, this is the one where we're going to need the
bleep?
The bleep.
Okay.
This comes from Samuel Price. His actual name is Pierce, and he explains that to his wife in a letter that he actually has changed his name when he enlisted because he was afraid that he wouldn't get his enlistment bonuses because Samuel Price had been pulled for, what's the term?
Buggery?
What? No, he'd been drafted.
Oh, drafted. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought you were... Never mind. I thought you were saying...
So at this point, he's been drafted. He's telling her that he's kind of adjusted his name on the roster so that he can still get his enlistment bonus and all that stuff because he's afraid he wouldn't get it as a draftee. Okay. And he's written home to his wife, and he's telling her to not worry that he's with this detachment of the 116th Pennsylvania Company I, but he's still in Washington. He's on a pioneer's detail. He's just working on forts. He hasn't been sent to the actual unit yet. And he says to her, "You speak of being true to me. I never thought anything else of you, for I always know that you don't like f***ing."
Your reaction, Matt, to, I don't know, are you reacting to saying the word f***ing or to Eric's laugh? Oh.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
You want me to read it again?
Yeah, no, this is fine. Go ahead.
Very well, and I don't think that you want any other man to do it for you, for I think I always gave you as much as you wanted, but I think you appeared very cool towards me when I was home, for I thought you thought more of your neighbors than you did of me, or else you would have stayed upstairs with me more than you did.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
Oh, she's got something going on.
Not necessarily, but...
Is her last name Mrs. Jones?
What's interesting is that his letters survive, and they are actually from his time on the railroad. He's a railroadman before the Civil War and into the early years of the Civil War, and so he thinks he's going to be able to avoid the war and avoid the draft because he's on an important...
Oh, sure.
He's on important work with the railroad, and he spends significant amount of time away from home already. And then he gets called up for the war or gets drafted in the war. Now, sadly, he is not going to survive the war. He'll actually be mortally wounded at Cold Harbor.
Now, was that the dirtiest one you were able to find?
That's the most direct one.
The most direct one. Yeah.
It's pretty direct.
Yeah, that is pretty direct.
Yeah.
And maybe she does have something going on, though. I mean, it sounds like, or she just doesn't love him anymore. I mean, we never know. We'll never know. We have to dig them up and ask them.
It's interesting because this set of letters comes from IrishAmericanCivilWar.com, which they've done a really good job laying out these letters, and it appears to be, when you read his additional letters, that he is trying, and he actually says it, trying to be or having a better relationship with her. He recognizes that he was gone a lot for work to begin with, and now he's gone in the Army, and he wants to feel the love of this relationship. He wants to build this relationship better. And of course, he gets
hard to do.
Wounded. Yeah,
hard to do from a distance.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. There's some. I think I told you a friend of mine was looking for Civil War letters on eBay, and he found one that was from a cousin to a cousin, both males. Older cousin, I guess, had a younger cousin back home. I think it was Indiana. And he was writing back home about all the girls that were back there, and I guess the cousin from home was sending him letters saying, "Yeah, and they actually used the term, which I'm there,
right,
but they actually used that term, which surprised me that they had that term or that they even knew to do that." Back then, like I think of them as naive and boring people, but they're not.
People are people.
People are people. Always have been.
Babies have been made for all of human history. It's not like we figured out how to do these things in the last half century.
No. Well, no. But you think of people looking at sex as a utilitarian thing. Until you start to dig into these things and you find out that they're just as disgusting as every other generation.
I think that's a carryover from what the Victorians wanted people to see them as.
Absolutely.
I think that's true.
And they did a really good job of getting us to buy into the I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for.
The bullshit.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, you also have the Puritan background of the United States.
Sure.
Too,
yes.
With the original colonies, the Puritans, the Shakers, the Quakers, all of those guys were very tight-laced when it came to relationships and sexual relationships in particular.
Yeah. And then you find that, I always find it interesting because it seems like in those very oppressive times from the past, you also find it's the most debauched time.
Wouldn't terribly surprise me.
It just makes sense that the opposite or greater reaction would be debauchery to a society like that.
Like if you want to find some irony in all of this, go back and read the writings of Queen Victoria herself in relationship to sex and whatnot.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Her and Albert were.
I'd heard that. Yeah. So, but she wrote about it.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, in her own private diaries that I think were just recently released to the public by the
Vicky.
But it's like we have it in our minds that these people were straight prudes.
Yeah.
And it's all a bunch of nonsense.
But that's like you're saying, though. That just goes to show what a great job they did at leaving behind this legacy of uprightness or upstandingness and, prudish, I guess you could say prudish, or at least pure and dignified and everything. But they really weren't.
Well, and it also varied from culture to culture. I mean, look at France. The Moulin Rouge is late 19th century, early 20th century.
Sure. That's disgusting, those French.
I wouldn't go that far.
No. Somewhere in between France and Victorian England, I think, is really the reality of Western culture at that time, I'm guessing.
You're saying those are the bookends? And
yes,
somewhere in between?
And then somewhere in between is what real people were like. These are, like we just get these ideas because these are the people that wrote stuff that we're reading now.
Yeah.
But, the average guy that didn't write stuff and, they were doing whatever people do. The women, too. Everybody. Humans are humans.
Humans are humans. This is a great story, too, kind of speaking to that. This actually comes from the Peninsula Campaign, spring of 1962. Lieutenant Ezra Ripley and several officers of the 29th Massachusetts Infantry brought charges against their colonel, Ebenezer Pierce, for, quote, conduct unbecoming of an officer and a gentleman. These charges included supposedly forcing several privates to give a concert composed of, quote, certain improper, vulgar, and indecent songs, during which the commanding officer, quote, did laugh and encourage while singing. Specifically, his accuser claimed the song The Farmer's Daughter was very vulgar. After hearing the copious testimony concerning the nature of the song The Farmer's Daughter and the contents of a book entitled Fanny Hill, or the Memoir of a Woman of Pleasure, by John Cleland, which had originally been published in 1748 and is still published to this day. It's one of the longest-running books in English literary history. The book was supposedly found within the colonel's quarters, but it was never confiscated over the course of the 11-day trial. It seems very likely that the book had done the rounds of the regiment, as Colonel Pierce insisted it belonged to one of his orderlies and, quote, manifested a becoming indignation at finding it in his quarters. Though the colonel was found guilty on 3 counts and recommended for dismissal from the service, the commander of the Department of Virginia, that's Major General John Wool at the time, however, judged the accusation to be an internal disagreement over rank and privilege rather than morality. And he dismissed the charges.
Have you ever heard that song?
No, do you
The
have
Farmer's
it?
Daughter? I don't have it.
Well, I could find it maybe.
I doubt you will. I've sung that as a marching song once or twice.
I've sung Alouette as a marching song, and that gets pretty raunchy as well, but I've not done this.
I'll lay it out for you when we're done here, because it's interesting.
See, I don't know. Let's see here. Farmer's Daughter.
We'll talk about it when you're older.
No. I'm looking it up here. They're. Let's see if maybe this is a country version of the song, because sometimes the people do that.
No, I guarantee you it's not. No.
All right. Then I can't find it here. All right, go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was just going to say Colonel Ebenezer Pierce goes on to be wounded at the Battle of White Oak Swamp and is later discharged for disability in November of 1864. So he is going to be able to continue his career with the service at least for a while. That's really the extent of the quotes and letters and diaries and stories that I was able to pull together for you, but it really, I feel, gives a wide breadth of what's going on at this time in regards to love, sex to a lesser extent, and camaraderie.
Yeah, it is interesting. I can't imagine what it must be like to have these feelings as a young man for, a young woman who's my age. I grew up with her or whatever. We know each other from town, and I'm off in this war, and we're writing to each other. and you have all of those feelings that young people have,
Right.
the physical and the emotional, and that's got to be really difficult to just not explode. Like, do you remember, like, when you're young, you're in your teens or early 20s and you're in love with, you're like infatuated with someone, and it's just like you think about them to the point where your chest feels like it's going to explode, And now you can't, but there's nothing these guys can do. They're far away.
Right.
They can't go see her whenever they want.
Right.
So they can write to her and, say what they want to say. Matt, it was great to have you on again to talk about
Always a pleasure.
love in the Civil War. We're going to do this for most of the big holidays. I guess the next one would be St. Patrick's Day. A lot of Irish in the Civil War.
Absolutely. Second largest ethnic group in the United States.
There you go. A lot of drinking in the Civil War. A lot of drinking in modern America on St. Patrick's Day. Everybody's Irish.
Everybody's Irish for a
on
day.
St. Patrick's Day. We don't mind. And then I guess after that we'll wait until 4th of July. And then flip it on over to I don't know, maybe Halloween.
I haven't found any references to Halloween as of yet. That'll be an interesting dig.
We'll look into that one. That's
Right.
a maybe. But of course,
Though we could do more stuff like we did the story about spiritualism. We could do stuff like that.
oh, that'd be fine.
Okay.
These are one-offs, these are
Right.
specials, so that's fine. We could do it however we want to do it. All right, so maybe we'll deal with either spiritualism, Victorian spiritualism, or Halloween itself, or whatever. Of course, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then that'll be it. We'll just do a year of it. We don't need to do it every year, or maybe we do. I don't know. Maybe we'll revisit every other year. Who knows?
Sure.
The point is, we're going to. Thank you. We're going to close out. So thank you, Matt. We're going to close out on this episode with something from the Ken Burns Civil War documentary, which it is a beautiful letter. It is also questioned whether this is the actual one or how many versions there are, or if there was an original version that was like, oh, this is sweet, but I think I could make it a little better. And then somebody added to it and said, look what I found on his dead body. And, there's this whole, so we don't really know. But the point is, it's beautiful. So we're going to play it for you. I think the guy's name is Paul Roebling, who's reading it. And it's just done very well. Beautiful words, beautiful music, horribly sad sentiment, well read. So we're going to end the show with this one here. Matt, thank you very much for coming on again.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Eric, for having me again.
Eric, thank you for your kind support and laughter.
I do what I can.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for indulging me in my horrible singing in the beginning, and I promise I will never do that again. And I also promise I will probably break that promise. Goodbye.
A week before the Battle of Bull Run, Sullivan Ballou, a major in the 2nd Rhode Island Volunteers, wrote home to his wife in Smithfield.
July the 14th, 1861, Washington, D.C. Dear Sarah, the indications are very strong that we shall move in a few days, perhaps tomorrow. And lest I should not be able to write you again, I feel impelled to write a few lines that may fall under your eye when I am no more. I have no misgivings about or lack of confidence in the cause in which I am engaged, and my courage does not halt or falter. I know how American civilization now leans upon the triumph of the government, and how great a debt we owe to those who went before us through the blood and suffering of the Revolution. And I am willing, perfectly willing, to lay down all my joys in this life to help maintain this government and to pay that debt. Sarah, my love for you is deathless. It seems to bind me with mighty cables that nothing but omnipotence can break. And yet my love of country comes over me like a strong wind and bears me irresistibly with all those chains to the battlefield. The memory of all the blissful moments I've enjoyed with you come crowding over me, and And I feel most deeply grateful to God and you that I've enjoyed them for so long. And how hard it is for me to give them up and burn to ashes the hopes of future years, when, God willing, we might still have lived and loved together and see our boys grown up to honorable manhood around us. If I do not return, my dear Sarah, never forget how much I loved you, nor that when my last breath escapes me on the battlefield, it will whisper your name. Forgive my many faults and the many pains I have caused you. How thoughtless, how foolish I have sometimes been. But oh, Sarah, if the dead can come back to this earth and flit unseen around those they love, I shall always be with you in the brightest day and the darkest night. Always. Always. And when the soft breeze fans your cheek, it shall be my breath, or the cool air your throbbing temple. It shall be my spirit passing by. Sarah, do not mourn me dead. Think I am gone, and wait for me, for we shall meet again.
Sullivan Ballou was killed a week later at the First Battle of Bull Run.